And then from San Francisco, if you travel northeast, you're going to get to the capital of California, which happens to be Sacramento. And then from Sacramento, northeast, that's where Weimar is located. So we are in the bottom part of the Sierra Mountains. So Anwin is on the other side. So Anwin would be somewhere here. They're actually geographically kind of close, but there's no direct road. You have to go all the way down, and so it takes like 4 or 5 hours, probably 5 hours to get there, you know. The fires also were more on the left side of things, you know. And yeah, it's a whole mess with that electric issue, the fires and things. In fact, just on Friday, a judge ordered, I think they had to pay like $50 billion or something crazy, the electric company, because they neglected. They were not doing maintenance of the lines. They were just making money, not maintaining the lines, and then that's what caused the fires. And then the judge, the company was like begging to the judge, hey, you know, be merciful with us. There's so many trees in California and so many lines. But they didn't maintain the lines. It was their fault, you know. Here they are making a lot of money, you know, and cutting corners, and now that they see themselves, you know. That's right. That's right. They need not only new governor, but new house and everything there. Yes. So let me show you a little clip of our high school. We also have an excellent high school there at Weimar. If you could run me the first video in the back. So I have to switch the screens and put the other one. You have to switch the screen to yours. Switch the screens.
It's funny looking back, those first few days.
Hi! Hi, Danny! I remember you!
Meeting new people, exploring all the sights and sounds of my new home.
What? I'm going to read them all, and then you're going to tell me... Who got that little dot thingy?
Jesus gave everything for you. The question is, will you give everything?
I realized there's this common thread that runs through the very fabric of who we are here. The passion to know Christ.
Oh, I remember. Yeah?
The daily struggle to reach 10,000 steps.
You know what? You just stop looking at Chloe!
Although, that's not too hard here.
You know what? Stop running in the dorm! No pillow fights. I told you, we're not...
But more than anything, I think I wanted what those kids had. A relationship that never fails. Morning by morning, I ask myself the question, how do I know him, love him, and tell the world about him every day?
Hey, Natalie, right? Here, can I help you with this?
One person, one moment at a time. Caught a glimpse of a lady tearing up at our concert last night, and then I realized so was I. Josh is still learning the trumpet though.
The difference between endoskeleton and exoskeleton. Do you know what the difference is?
Not really.
Okay, so basically...
I realized the importance of communion with Christ, whether before a test or during a trip across the Pacific. I'll never forget my time as a missionary. Hello to goodbye, major to minor, with all the distance in between. Pouring your heart out to Christ until 2 in the morning. It's those moments, they're often so fleeting, but they never seem to fade. The crazy thing is, these moments have been there every day. Moments that made it worth it. The challenges that they brought. These were all the moments that led us into eternity. This was life.
There's also the New Start program, the one we were talking, sharing a little bit of the research there that we're doing. Also, we have a little hotel there where they generate a little bit of funding. People can stop and stay there for a few days. And also there is a second program. That one is the depression program. It's separate from the New Start program, administrative, and it's run separately from the other one. That program is a fantastic depression program. You know, there is no other treatment similar to that. And you know, the sad thing with depression, lots of young people, you know, causing themselves self-harm and all these things. So the reason why so many problems is because people do exactly the opposite to what they're supposed to be doing for their mental health. They think that they're indestructible, doesn't matter their habits, and sooner or later those factors combine and bam, you know, you get those type of problems. We'll talk a little bit more about it in the second hour. And also we have this college there. Nowadays it's an accredited college. In the old days, Ramirez was not accredited. Today it's an accredited college. The same body that accredits PUC and Loma Linda and La Sierra and all these other institutions accredits also WIMAR. So we have a natural science. If you want to go into medicine, if you want to go into dentistry, if you want to go into physical therapy, you know, you can take that natural science. We have education. We have nursing. We're actually working on making a master's in nursing in the near future. We also have business administration, Christian psychology, which also we're working on making a master out of it, and also theology, thank you. And we also have a short medical evangelism program if you want to come and learn. You're not too old to do this. You know, we have people from all ages that come to do that program. It's a 4-month program. It starts in August, end of August, and it finishes in December. It's a practical course. You're out in the communities serving people, learning how to do the cooking classes, learning how to do the depression community program, learning how to do cholesterol lowering programs, stop smoking, and all these things. You know, nice, practical type of program. For the educational side of things, go to the website wimar.edu. That's where the information for the high school and college is. For the information on the New Start program, the 18-day lifestyle program, the website there is newstart with a T .org, okay, or .com, either one of those. And the atmosphere is such a nice atmosphere, you know, because we have students and staff from literally all over the world, you know. So it's a very, very nice environment to be there. Mm-hmm.
How many students would you have completely in the undergraduate programs
The challenge that we have right now is that because we are a growing institution, we have limitation on the dorms. So because of that, our capacity is about 120 or so. So it's a nice family-like, atmosphere. Everybody gets to know each other and so forth. So we're working on making new dorms and things, which is funny because I was recently in another Adventist university in the Northwest. I won't say the name, but they're having challenges there, and they're actually caught in there, They're shutting down programs and things like that. That's not our program, a problem. Our problem is that is expansion, things are growing and so forth. So, which is a nice problem to have,
What about an internet program, like internet classes at all?
Yes, there is possibility of doing remote learning. So there's a whole department that takes care of that. Certain classes are available nowadays. And for example, the Masters in Christian Psychology, for example, that one I know is going to be online. And other ones also, It's a matter of contacting them and asking them, which of those classes are available online, so that you can learn in a remote way, So that's the nice thing about it. And also, if you guys are interested, my wife and I recently recorded a vegan Mexican cooking classes, the real thing. This is not the fake type, This is the real thing, If you're interested in that, and also people were asking about the message this morning. I have a lot of programs with these people. Caribbean, Australia, not America, Caribbean, Australia. Just Google that. You'll find their email. Just send them an email asking them how you can watch, this material and so forth. The cooking program is also with them. That's right, Caribbean, Australia. It's a series, It's not just one program, but it's a series that my wife and I did. So yeah, you can contact them regarding that. And they were asking me also about the addresses that I shared this morning. Yeah, these are the ones, where all the research is there in the research gate. That's the Twitter account there, the twitter.com/EddieRDMD. All the time I'm putting there the latest studies and so forth, and the YouTube and Instagram. These are another of the things there that I put recently on the Twitter page. This one about chronic Lyme, This is an article from Harvard, and very, very interesting. You can go ahead and find it and read it there on the Twitter account. And also this one, very, very, very interesting, about how lack of sleep messes up your fat metabolism. So people that don't sleep enough, or they sleep incorrectly, what we're talking about, remember? You need to go to bed early. If you go to bed late, you mess around with your internal clocks and you're more prone to diseases secondary to that. I went to medical school going to bed at 10 p.m. every night. And it worked very well. Lord bless me, and I was able to graduate first place in my class, so it worked very well. Your brain is, when it stores information, is exactly at that time of the night. If you have to work at night, what you need to do, you need to send a request to change your shift in the morning. That's the ideal solution to that one. And check this one. This is from the American Heart Association, and another study. A friend of mine actually did this study. How sleeping less than 6 hours raises your risk of cancer. So you are, messing around with dangerous things, Your body was not built to work like that, you know. You are supposed to enter your cycles and so forth. And sadly, you know, things like cancer, we're seeing a lot on young people, you know, very sadly and concerning due to the habits that they have, you know. It's the law of the universe, you know, for every action, there's a reaction, you know. So you seed bad seeds, you're going to get bad plants, you know. That's the way that this works. Again, they're there in that Twitter account. So studies like that, you know, all the time I'm putting there on that Twitter website. So I wanted to talk to you about a fascinating concept that is called the concept of epigenetics. Have you ever noticed the following pattern? Disease runs in families. For example, there are families that there's a lot of sick people. Have you ever noticed that? Yes. Man, and all kinds of sicknesses in that particular families. Well, at the same time, there's other families that pretty much most of the people there are healthy, you know. Epigenetics explains that phenomenon. So what is that epigenetics? Think about that epigenetics the following way. Think about it like this light. If you wanted to investigate how this light works and you make a hole there, you're going to see there's a cable there. You know? And what does that cable has? Electricity. So you can have the bulb. You can have the cable. You can have the electricity. That doesn't mean the bulb is going to turn on. You need what? The switch. Think about epigenetics that way. So your mother, your father, your grandma may have had this or that disease. That doesn't mean you need to have it. Because the switch needs to turn on. Time magazine recently did an article on that. The science of epigenetics reveals how the choices you make can change your, and who else's? Your children. See, the choices you are taking today, they are either starting or shutting down disease genes. And when you have children, you also inherit those predispositions. And that's why you cannot live in a selfish way, say, oh, I don't care, you know, I can do whatever I want, it's my body. That's not true. You're actually affecting other people's health by the choices you are making. And you know, think about those genes like this, like a cookbook. You know, what's a cookbook? A cookbook is a collection of recipes. Now, what is a recipe? A recipe is the step-by-step instructions of how to accomplish something. Tells you there, you know, do this, add that, mix this, add that. And then at the end of the process, you'll end up with muffins or this dish or that dish and so forth. In the same way, that's what your genes are. Basically, your genes are the step-by-step instructions of how to accomplish something. So when your body, for example, gets injured, in the gene, there is like a computer program there that activates, and then as it runs, the body starts the reparation process and so forth. Or as we saw in the last message on cancer, remember? The program, how to make those chemicals that we'll be able to use to destroy the cancer, it's a computer program that those cells have. So think about a cooking book or think about it like a phone. with apps, okay? So the apps that you have in your phone, each one has different functions. Let me ask you this. Do you run all your apps on your phone at the same time? No. Not because you have the app, that means you have to run it. No. In the same way, there are multiple apps on your phone. And there's multiple apps on your cells, depending on the need. The need is what turns on or off those apps. And as I mentioned in the last service, the health, the genes are dependent on the need, and that's why, depending on the need, we know now that disease has its origin on the genes. So you have health genes, you have sickness genes. And what epigenetics does is the following. Remember the electricity? Remember the cable? Epigenetics is that switch that turns on or off disease. Okay? So not because you have the gene, that means that gene needs to run necessarily. And the process of making those genes work is actually quite complex. Let me show it to you in a little video. So this is the cell, and then inside the cell, there's the nucleus. So we travel inside the nucleus. Inside the nucleus of the cell is where we have our famous DNA. That's the famous DNA. Now, any time that the gene activates, any time that you run the app, this is what happens inside your cell. First, I need to get a copy of that particular recipe that I need. So there's a micro machine that knows how to open the DNA. And then there is another micro machine that knows how to make a copy of that recipe. So here you have that micro machine is making a copy of that recipe. Now, I'm not done. I just have the recipe. I need to cook the recipe. So I need to interpret that recipe. So what needs to happen, that recipe needs to travel to the edge where the nucleus is. If it identifies correctly, the door opens, and then the recipe can travel outside. And then once the recipe reaches outside, then another micro machine assembles and now starts to interpret the recipe. So here is the way that the interpretation takes place. You have 3 pairs, and those need to fit perfectly in a complementary way. And then do you see the bottom part? On the bottom part is the result of that protein. Okay? So things are being interpreted in the top, and then the end result is in the bottom. If you were to put the camera with a zoom out, you can see the bottom is the resulting protein, the top is the recipe. Now, I'm not done yet. There is one more process to be taken. And this one involves folding that protein. So there is another micro machine that knows how to fold this protein. Now, if you make a mistake in the angle, you put the wrong angle, the protein is no good. This needs to be done accurately. So every single one of those angles need to be done correctly. And once the folding is done, one last step, and that is something that works like a little truck, picks up that protein and takes it wherever is needed. Simple process. In fact, I was taking recently a medical review class update, and And I had one of the top experts. This is called biochemistry. That's the science that studies this. And the guy that was giving the lecture, he said, I don't know what you believe or whatever, but somebody designed this. There's no question, This is so complex that only one thing that doesn't work, the whole thing doesn't work, So you need to make sure that all the parts are in place, that all the things are there. If not, the thing doesn't work. This is how complex this is. So let me show you something fascinating. Is as the symmetry of your body. The body has symmetry. You have the hands here, and we have legs here, and so forth. Now, on that computer program, on that app, on your cell, we said that you have little computer programs there. You have the cooking recipes. On those recipes, you also have the instructions of how to make the human body. Okay? And not only how to make the human body, but what type of human body you're going to make. It's codified there on those apps, on those recipes. What color of skin you're going to have, how tall you're going to be, what are going to be your eye color, even your intelligence, and even your character, your personality, and things like those are also codified on those genes. So think about the following. How many cells we said we had in our body? 1 trillion cells. Now, every cell in your body has the instructions of how to make every organ in the body. In other words, the cells that you have in your hand, they have the instructions of how to make the brain. Question, how come you don't have your brain here? Your feet, they know how to make your lungs. How come you don't have the lungs down there? You know what is the answer? Epigenetics. Remember we said with epigenetics, we turn on and we turn off the recipes. So, when you were in your mother's womb and it came time to make the hands, the genes related to hands were turned on, and the genes not related to hands were turned off by epigenetics. And that's why you end up with the symmetry that you have. Your hands here, your head here, your lungs here, your liver here, and all that symmetry, it's due to epigenetics. Now, sometimes things like radiations, things like medications, and so forth, they can mess around with those epigenetic switches. And you probably heard about malformations, when somebody ends up with an extra finger and stuff like that, because they were messing around with those epigenetic switches. Now, to me, it's very interesting that in the Bible, in Psalms 139, you see there that the psalmist says, your eyes saw my substance being what? In verse 16, my eyes saw my substance being what? Yet unformed. And where? In your what? In your book, they all were written. Which book is that? The DNA, that's right, Anybody knows where the psalmist studied his genetics, How did he know this information, That we have a book. And that book is a custom book. So your book is different than my book, okay? All of us have a different book with one exception. I'll show you in a minute. So, for example, these ladies they are identical twins. If they are identical twins, it means they share the same book. Those are the only exception. Okay? That's the reason why they look so much alike. You know, have you ever seen a pair of those twins? You know, they're so identical. So, but notice something interesting. Notice their color of their hair. And in parentheses, they didn't painted their hair. Okay? How come the hair color is different? What's the answer? And it starts with an E. Epigenetics. Epigenetics. By some reason, the color coding for the color of the hair was turned on one and was shut down on the other one. Or look at this one. Look at the eyes on this dog. See, it's not that one eye has one book and the other eye has another book. They all have the same book. Okay? It's one book that you have in your whole body copying every one of your cells. But notice the eyes of this dog. Why is different? Again, the same answer, epigenetics. By some reason, the color gene for the eye is turned off on one and is turned on the other one. And same thing with this cell. You can actually visualize those genes in this cell. Remember the video that we saw? When we went and did the copy of the recipe, remember? We saw the DNA. See, that DNA was stretched out, remember? And then it opened up, and then it made the copy. Okay, you can visualize that. This is the nucleus of the cell. This is where the DNA is. And you can see there's two areas. There's an area that is dark, very dark area. And then there's another area that is light in color. Do you see it? Yes. Okay. The area that is light, that area has the active DNA. The active DNA is stretched out. But the genes that are inactive, okay, the genes that are inactive, those are the dark area. Let me ask you this. What do you do in your home with so much stuff that you have? Where do you put it? You put it in a little box, isn't it? And then put it under the bed and over the dresser and wherever there's a little space there, you put your stuff. The same thing happens with your DNA. The genes that are shut down, that are not active. Remember, like the hands? We said, we don't need genes here of heart. We don't need genes of brain here in the hands. Those genes that are shut down, the body packages those genes and puts them away. And that's why you see the dark color, because they have higher density. They're packed. That doesn't mean they cannot potentially be active. This is what happened to the patient that I showed you this morning. Remember? The one that was very sick with diabetes and all these things. The disease genes were on that person, and the health genes were off. As he changed his lifestyle, those packaged health genes were actually unpacked, okay? And the disease genes were packed away due to the changes in the lifestyle. So that packaging of those cells, there's a fascinating process. Now there's a special mouse called the agouti mouse. The agouti mouse is that mouse that is yellow in color. Have you ever seen a yellow mouse? Not unless you go to one of these laboratories. Mouses are not yellow. How come this mouse is yellow? Because these guys artificially turn on the disease genes on that mouse. So that mouse is going to develop obesity. That mouse is going to develop cancer. It's going to develop diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, and all kinds of health problems. Okay. Why do they do that mean thing to the mouse? Because they do experiments with this mouse. Okay? So they take this sick mouse, and then they can try like a new medication or something, before they try it in humans to see, what kind of effect it has and so forth. So what they did in this experiment is something fascinating. They took that yellow mouse, but it's yellow mouse because by messing around with those genes, they end up messing around with the skin genes. Okay? That's why. So this is what ended up happening. Those genes, as they modified them, what they did, they had this mouse, when it was pregnant, they put that sick mouse on the New Start program, vegetarian nutrition, exercise, rest, water, and you can see the baby of that mouse. Do you see it changing color? What does it mean if it's changing color? The disease genes were shut down. Fascinating, isn't it? So that mouse no longer was a sick mouse. Now notice the fascinating thing. When they go and publish the results in the scientific literature, they reported that those changes were inherited to the third and fourth generation. Anybody has heard about that? Anybody else? Not necessarily Mendel's law, but Moses' law. Numbers 14:18, it says there, unto where? Until the third and fourth generation. And this is not the only time they say this, by the way. They say this many times.
Now, you said that the mouse was no longer sick, but the color was yellow. Did the color eventually replicate back to the right color? Because, the skin does replicate every so many months.
That's right. So the mouse sick, that one continued to be sick because they didn't have an option to turn off. So there are certain things that you cannot shut down. If you have a good gene and a bad gene, then you can switch from one to another. But if you just have bad gene, what are you going to shut down to? And that's the problem. That's why, that's the way that they turn on those disease genes on this mouse. So they actually destroy the good genes, and left just the sick genes. That's why it was that color. But the baby mouse that was born out of that pregnancy, because you require a father and a mother, okay, so then there's a mixture of new genes and things, okay, and that's why you were able to get some healthy genes there, plus the lifestyle that was able to turn on the health genes, okay? And those mice were healthy to the third and fourth generation. Again, anybody knows where Moses got his PhD on, on genetics, Now, the opposite also happens if you have the bad lifestyle, okay? In another experiment, they had these rats, and these were healthy rats, and they put them in the wrong program, okay? And they fed those rats all this junk food and all these foods high in fat and so forth. And those rats, when they had a pregnancy, that's when they were eating all this junk food. When they had those baby rats, these baby rats, the disease genes were turned on those rats. And those rats started choosing to eat junk food. When they analyzed their brains had changed. And they started having high rates of cancer and cholesterol and heart disease and all kinds of problems. So as you can see, the choices we take do have an impact on the health of these mice. And this is the published paper on that. And same thing happened during the Second World War. Second World War, the Germans conquered Holland, and they were interested because the Dutch people are very productive people regarding agriculture and so forth. I spoke there actually last year there. Lots of farms everywhere you go in the Netherlands. And they took the animals from the Dutch people so they could feed the Nazi army. Okay, that's the way that they were feeding the army. So the people in the Netherlands had little food to eat, you know, because they took their food and sent it to the front lines. So what were they eating? Just very few things that they were eating. And it's documented that there were some pregnant ladies that were surviving with 580 calories a day. I mean, that's like 1/4, 1/5, depending on your size, of the calories that you need for a day. And believe it or not, these pregnant ladies, many of them, those babies survived the pregnancy. Of course, you know, they had a small baby and all these things. But those genes of those babies, they got used to surviving with very little. So because from the beginning of their lives, they got used to surviving with very little, something happened to them. Once the war was over, then again, you know, the cakes and the cookies and the milk and the meat and all this junk started coming back again. And those thrifty genes, that's a medical term, that were used to survive with very little, now they receive all this overabundance of calories, and that make those people very sick. Very high rates of cancer and hypertension, heart disease, and all kinds of things. And this also explains the following. See, if in your past you had ancestors that happened to go through those rough times, there's a possibility you may be carrying those thrifty genes. And that's why just a few extra pounds, man, is disaster for you. And you actually can identify certain races that have this. People, for example, of Asia have this issue, you know. People in Asia, just a little bit of weight, man, disaster for them. People from Africa also have this issue, and Latinos, you know. We also have that issue. A little bit of gaining weight, man, is a disaster for our bodies. In fact, I even did a genetic analysis on myself because I'm interested very much in genealogy and so forth. And I have, according to the test, a very high probability of high risk of diabetes. But you measure my sugar is normal and everything. What's the answer here? It starts with an E. Epigenetics. The gene is there. If I don't take care of myself and I start gaining weight and choosing the wrong foods, I can assure you I'm going to end up diabetic. You know? But that doesn't mean that that needs to be a prophecy on you. As you make the right choices, then you can end up turning off the disease genes and turning on the health genes. So things, diseases, serious diseases such as dementia, you know, they have a strong, there's some genetic components there, you know, and the choices that you are making, you are either promoting those disease genes or you're promoting the health genes. Is up to you. And things like stress have an effect. Things like the food you eat. Look at what it says. Science has discovered that what we what? What we eat exerts the strongest effects on those epigenetic switches. Remember we were talking about that? Hara Huchibu, the 80% principle, okay? And that's why it is very well known people that are having, overeating and so forth, they're going to live less, because you turn on your disease genes. And not only that, your quality of life. See, many times when the person is young, in their 20s and so forth, they think that they're indestructible. And it's not true. The bill will arrive sooner or later, I can tell you. I mean, I have friends of mine that are my same age, and today, man, the knee and the back and all these pills they need to be taking and so forth. I can tell you the bill will arrive sooner or later, It's not true that you are indestructible, Also, this fascinating study. In this study, they had 30 men with prostate cancer. Sadly, a common cancer here in America. And what they did with these 30 men, instead of doing the usual treatment, they did intensive lifestyle interventions. The way the study worked, they took a sample of the prostate, number one, to put it in the microscope and confirm the diagnosis of cancer. And two, they started doing something. Remember the video we saw? How they made a copy of the recipe and then the recipe traveled outside, remember? If we count the recipes that are going out, we know which genes are active. Because only the genes that are active generate recipes, okay? Generates that code that went outside. If the gene is packaged, it cannot do that. So by counting the number of those recipes, of those genetic codes, we know which of the disease genes or health genes are on. So what they did, they put this 30 men on the New Start-like program, okay? Put them on a full plant-based diet, exercise, stop cessation, going to bed early, and all these good behaviors. And this is the result of the intervention. You can see it here in a visual way. Let me tell you how to interpret this. If you see the codes there on the side, you see those strange codes there, those letters? Those are the names of the genes. Genes have very weird names. Okay. Now, the line in the middle is the after and the before. If you see the very first line, that's the first patient, and then the very first line is the same patient after. Any change, just visually speaking? Yes, big changes there, isn't it? With the disease genes. That's right. Greener means it turned on. Red means it shut down correctly. Now, when we talk about cancer, okay, there's two big groups of genes involved with cancer. We have what is called cancer promoter genes. Good or bad? Bad. Those are the ones that stimulate the cancer to grow and so forth, to metastasize and so forth. And then we have a second group of genes called the cancer inhibitor genes. Good or bad? Good. You want to have those cancer inhibitor genes active. So what we learned this morning, remember how the cancer got destroyed and all those things? Cancer inhibitor genes are involved in all that process so that you destroy the cancer earlier and don't let it grow and so forth. Look at what they published in the results of the study. 400 genes associated with cancer were turned off or down. Good or bad? Good. That's very good, isn't it? The cancer promoter genes being turned off. and 50 genes associated with cancer inhibition were turned on or up. Good or bad? Fantastic. So see, you don't need to wait until the day the doctor hands you the diagnosis of cancer to do these changes. If you start doing these changes today, this is what's going to start happening inside of you. It's like a friend of mine, sent me a message a few days ago saying, I have a friend with type 4 cancer metastasized all over his body. What can he do? Man, you're asking me this too late, This is too late, that question should have come, 10 years ago, or something, But when it's all over the place, what can you do, But before that, you can do a lot. Can you see the issue here, So that's why we need to be so careful on the lifestyle that we have. Well, I told him that, it's not game over as long as you're breathing, there's still possibilities. But, but yeah, we go more on the miracle side of things, instead of the physiology type of things.
You mentioned that several members of your family have diabetes.
No, they don't have diabetes.
They don't have it?
No.
Okay, I was going to say, if they did have diabetes, have you put them through?
Oh, yes, no.
Their symptoms of,
They would have been shut down by now, Yes, I would have talked to them already. So, yeah. So, as you can see here, these cancer genes were turned off. Therefore, what do you expect with the cancer? It's going to shrink, and that's what happened when they published a follow-up left before, right after cancer shrinks. Now, this is not only a program about nutrition, it's called the New Start program. There's many other letters, okay? There's some people that follow only the N program. I can tell you it's not enough, okay? You need the rest of those letters, okay? Look at sleep. Basically in this study, 2 groups of volunteers, young, healthy volunteers, college age. They put one group to sleep 6 hours or less. They put the second group to sleep 10 hours. Too much, by the way, okay? Just for the comparison purposes. Then, by the end of the week, both groups stayed up for 40 hours. They took blood samples so they could check genes. What happened on the group that was sleeping 6 hours, healthy young volunteers of only sleeping 6 hours or less, 711 disease genes were turned on. So is sleep important? Absolutely. Just 1 week of sleeping 6 or less hours caused tremendous changes at the level of the genes. It does matter. Remember, what time did we say? That's right. Yeah, it does have a little bit of effect, but still it's not enough sleep. That's the issue, You do need at least 7 hours, and the range is 7 to 9. Everybody is different. Some people can handle 7, and if you can handle 7, that's fine. But some people do need to log in 8. Some people need their 9. And the younger actually need longer time, okay? So watch out for that. Amen. That's right. Absolutely. So another study they did on exercise. 15 minutes of exercise. They took a sample of the muscles after doing 15 minutes of exercise, check the genes, health genes were turned on. Just with 15 minutes of exercise. Now, I know it's kind of anti-American to talk about exercise, but we need exercise, okay? Life is too easy here in America. See, I was in Africa a few years ago. I spent there quite a bit of time with my wife. And I started observing the people in Africa. Man, so much exercise just to survive, you know. For example, they didn't have a place to buy food. Where did they got the food from? They had to grow their own food. Even the pastor that I was doing meetings with, he had to come back home, man, to work hard. He had a big, you know, field around his home. Every home there is like that because there's no place to buy food. So here you are, you know, hours and hours and hours working there. There was no running water. What do you do for the water? You had to go and get that water. So you would see these people, you know, with their buckets, you know, walking miles and miles and miles to the river or the pump or whatever to bring the water back. There's no electricity, no gas. How do you cook there? You had to go on with your axe, who again walk there a long ways, cut a piece of wood, and then carry that back. Man, you're talking about, you know, some good 5, 6 hours of intense exercise that you need just to survive. I mean, you cannot say, you know, I don't want to do it, man, you die, you know. No other choice, you know. That's the way that you're living there, you know. And that is a glimpse of how our ancestors live. Our ancestors is the lifestyle that they had before we had all these modern conveniences and so forth. So here in America, you know, I tell a patient, hey, you know, you need to do 30 minutes of exercise. 30 minutes of exercise, you know. Man, it's vacation there, you know, people in Africa, you know. 30 minutes of exercise, you know. But we need to find ways of being more active. Sitting down the whole day. Some people say, oh, I'm just going to go for my walk and I'm going to sit down the whole day. It doesn't work. You need to be physically active throughout the whole day in order to turn on those genes. So it's like a polar bear. Have you ever seen where the polar bear lives? So how is it? Nice and cold, isn't it? So maybe if you go there, you know, this is in the very, very north of the planet, you may be freezing there, but the polar bear is having a blast, you know. That's the way that God made it, and he likes it, you know. He has enough skin and everything to handle those terrible colds. Yet, imagine that you say, well, you know, I know of a nice and warm desert. I'm going to bring that polar bear there. What do you think the polar bear is going to say, you know? See, that's not the way that God designed that polar bear. Polar bear is having a blast there in that cold. In the same way, God gave us a certain lifestyle, and if we start having the wrong foods and wrong habits and so forth, it's like that polar bear in the desert. It's not the way that God made it. That's why we need to be very careful with the way that we live. And we need to go back to the basics, you know, type of lifestyle that will turn on those health genes and turn off those disease genes. That's the way that this epigenetics works.
Way was like 1600s, 1800s. You had no diseases and people worked.
If you notice, if you go and travel to those cemeteries where they, back in the 1800s and 1700s, you're going to see two big gaps there. You're going to see children dying very early, and that's because of, you know, hygiene and so forth. You know, there was a lot of high infant mortality back then. But then you're going to find the other people were dying in their 60s, 70s, and so forth. You know? So you had this big gap there. You know? So yes, you know, you even know, you know, probably some of your grandfathers or grandparents, you know, that were, you know, nice and strong, you know, and diseases such as dementia. Those things were rare in the old days, you know. And now, you know, you go to these nursing homes, man, so many people, you know, ending up with these type of problems. And that's because, you know, we are going far from the Garden of Eden lifestyle, you know. So we need to go back to the basics, to that type of lifestyle. So let's have a little quick break, and then we'll have our second session.